What's up, everybody? It's your favorite Forrest Whitaker Movies favorite nerd, and today we are looking at the Jyn Erso and Death Trooper figures from the latest wave from Star Wars Black Series from Hasbro. They are released this Friday for Force Friday, so if you're looking at getting them, that's your best chance. I ended up coming across a few early, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. The people that are responsible for helping me get that know that I'm forever in their debt. So I got these two, and I got the other two from the Rogue One aspect of the line coming tomorrow. And in regards to skits, we're not going to do like, you know, the conventional skits that we usually do here. We're just going to do some collection sharing as we've done in the past, and I'm going to talk about the way that I display my Star Wars stuff. Maybe it might help you do yours. So before we get into this, let me just say that I'm a huge, massive Star Wars fan. It's probably my favorite franchise that I'm involved in. Two of my kids are named after Star Wars characters. I'm a massive fan. That being said, it's not as though this is without issue, and we're going to get to those, so let's not waste much more time. So up first we have the Death Trooper. Now I'm a little bummed that he's called the Death Trooper. I wish he was called the Shadow Trooper. That's kind of a separate conversation, but if you listen to Nerd Rage Radio, which is a podcast that I run with Adam Russman, you'll know that one of my biggest complaints about what they're kind of doing with the Star Wars license now is just sort of doing EU themes without calling it the EU names. But that's neither here nor there. That's not the topic of this conversation. This conversation is about this fella, who is awfully thin, has a bit of a bird chest, and should probably get in that gym more. I'm sure the Empire, with all of their resources, can offer a bit of a workout program. He's just a little sleek for my liking. It's proportion-wise, it just doesn't seem quite right. I don't know if the torso is too long and the chest is too small. I'm not quite sure. But now that that's out of the way, let's go through it. Head is on a ball hinge like a Marvel Legend, so you get up to there, down to there, and the swivel's intact. It has like a almost like a green chrome finish on the eyes, silver detailings on the face, and then the same green chrome down here, which show up a bit better. Pardon me. And that all works fairly well. The head sculpt is really cool. It's a good likeness from what I've seen so far in the movie. You know, it's hard to judge without seeing the movie yet. But we'll get there, I suppose. All the sculpt work is good. Like the undersuit has sculpted lines all throughout. The armor has sculpted lines all throughout. And the backpack is fully sculpted. And the buckles on the shoulder bits that connect the pieces of armor have a silver paint finish, which is done really clean and really well. For the diaphragm joint, it's a ball peg. So you get the swivel, and you get a little bit down and a little bit back. And I think overall it works pretty well. For the arms, we have the armor pieces, which all have the same kind of sculpted detail, as well as the sculpt line work in the undersuit. And this piece here is a softer plastic, which helps with the articulation. We'll get to a problem in tomorrow's video about such things, but here it works pretty well. You can get it up, and it'll just kind of form its way around the shoulder, and then you get the entire swivel all the way around, so that works well. No bicep swivel, but you do get an elbow swivel, so that works fairly well. I would like to see some double joints start to get used in these Star Wars Black Series, but that's for another day. Wrist swivel and hinge in out. Same for the other side, except the hinge is in out also. Now this helps because this guy's going to be carrying a blaster, like a rifle, so it does help in that regard. But most of the times, like, the only thing is if you were to use this pistol, which I'm guessing this holster is for, I'll double check that. I'm not entirely sure, because the blaster rifle has a hard time fitting in, which we can talk about. As you can see, he holds his rifle just fine. We'll see if he holds the pistol as well. He does. So no problems there. Not a single lick of paint on the pistol. But I'm not sure we would expect much more if the camera would focus on that for me, please. Oh well, it lost its time. And then we have this rifle, which is super warped. A blow dryer could probably fix that, and it has that little red piece of paint there, which is okay, I guess. Moving down the figure, we have this belt piece. All of these, the belt piece itself is a softer plastic that fits around a grooved piece inside the torso of the figure, so that's fine. And then we have this, which is a holster. I don't know. This rifle has a really hard time. I tried messing with it to get it to go in. It didn't. It seemed like it was doing more harm than good, so I stopped. These pieces have like a different glossy finish, and then the flat finish throughout. That's all fine. Well, it's not really a flat finish. It's more so just the color of the soft plastic. But the black glossy bits do look good. It breaks it up well. T-jointed ball joints for hips, but still relatively limited out to there. Forward and back to there. So I think that's fine. And then you have a thigh swivel, double jointed knee. That's a really decent sculpt, I must say. And of course the glossy black armor has all the sculpted detail that we've kind of come to expect. And then ankles, we have tilt forward slightly, a fair bit back, and then the rocker is built in. So articulation wise, this guy does really quite well, all things considered. And of course, next up, it's a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel. And the problem here is just typical Hasbro stuff. So she has this piece that sits on top. It's a separate piece. It's somewhat challenging to get off, but you can, which reveals a pretty decent head sculpt but terrible paint. Now I'm sure if you're nice with your brush, you can do some real good work here. The hair looks like it has a dry brush, darker brown on top of the lighter brown, and that looks good. The eyebrows and eyes and all that stuff are painted fairly well, and lips are painted well. It's just, it comes across as very, you know, kind of soulless, you know. But if you get in there with some washes and stuff, and put some gloss on those eyes, I think you could really bring this to life, because the sculpt itself is fairly decent. So ball hinge head, get you down to there, up to there, and then the swivel is intact, so that all works well. Same ball joint at the torso that we're used to, and then the tunic and stuff is all sculpted well, has the wrinkles and whatnot, so you get the swivel and you get a bit of roundabout. Soft piece of plastic for the vest, or it's really a jacket, but it acts as such, and that is done really well. So it's a green, and then it's got the kind of more brownish color painted on. The silver is painted on. There's a lot of painted detail. The little beige there and the red, all that stuff is done. For the arms, we have a hinged ball hinge, or disc hinge rather. Get you up to there. Really good tolerance on that too, as a matter of fact. And the swivel is intact. No bicep swivel once again, but you do get it at the elbow, and that's okay for a smaller frame figure. And the wrinkles and stuff all look good, as does the paint line, which does get a little bit outside of the line sculpt-wise. Individual results will vary, obviously, but it is done fairly clean, at least, on both sides. For the hands, we have a hinge up and down, which is nice to have a pistol. And then the swivel and then the paint on there looks good as well. The pistol itself has silver paint on top of a black sculpt, and that works well, and it goes in her holster here. If you untab that, tuck this in, and then tab it back. And you know, a lot of times with holsters like this, like the little tabs, it's always frustrating to get them to go back in. This goes extremely well, and as does the one we'll be looking at tomorrow. Just a side note, something I found interesting. So all the pants have like this like kind of rough textured throughout, which is nice. And then the wrinkles and stuff and all that stuff is sculpted. The seams and all that all looks good. This is a floating piece, this holster bit, which goes around her waist and then around her thigh, and that works well. T-jointed ball joints for hips get you out to there, front to there, back really nothing, but I think that's fine. It's kind of an odd sculpt in the back for her backside. Like it's just a bit bizarre. Not the best I've ever seen. Thigh swivel at the bottom. T-jointed ball joints. Double jointed knee, that works well. And then at the boot, they're all sculpted, including the little like loop, like the pull-up loops on the back of the boot. I thought that was a nice touch. And ankle tilt down. Nothing really up, and the rocker is built in, so that's fine. I would have liked more of a tilt up, especially for a small frame figure, and the boot colors don't match, which is a bit frustrating. Size comparison wise, this line gets a little, well, not this line necessarily, but collecting 6-inch Star Wars figures can get a little tricky, because most people are using a combination of Black Series, SH Figuarts, Mafex in order to kind of build their collection. So let's talk about it. So we have the Black Series Force Awakens Pilot, we have the SH Figuarts Luke, the SH Figuarts Shadow Trooper, and the Mafex Darth Vader. What's nice about this is the Death Trooper is still smaller than Vader, so that works. It's bigger than a Stormtrooper from SH Figuarts, which is interesting. And the SH Figure Arts one is slightly smaller than the Stormtrooper, but you know what? Let's just go see. Hold on one second. So he is slightly taller than the Stormtrooper. That's interesting. I wonder if that seems to be the case when we watch the film as well, if they're like larger troops. But I think that both kind of work out well. It's nice to see Jyn is a little on the smaller side. Just on a shelf, it's just going to break it up nicely. So yeah, what I'm doing is basically using one bookcase and dividing it up by shelves. So on the top row, I have my heroes from the original trilogy. The only issue is I don't know really what to do with the Rebel characters or the Rogue One characters, so they're up there as well for now. Next row down, heroes from the sequel trilogy. Interestingly enough, all Hasbro. That's one shelf that's all Hasbro. And then villains from the sequel trilogy. And villains from the original trilogy. This is a blend of Hasbro, Mafex, and SH Figure Arts. And depends on who you ask, but heroes from the original trilogy, I'm sorry, prequel trilogy. Mostly SH Figure Arts here. I don't know, I need that Hasbro Anakin in my life. And then villains from the prequel trilogy. And then I have an empty shelf here. Maybe I'll use that for the Rebels and Rogue One. And then just random aliens. Aliens doing alien stuff, mucking about. Final thoughts wise, I do recommend both at their price point. I think that they're both kind of at least acceptable, if not more, for a $20 price point. The Shadow Trooper is a little limited in the articulation department in some regards. It's just that single jointed elbow and those T-jointed, ball jointed hips with the armor on top don't necessarily lend him towards more dynamic poses. But looking stoic on a shelf, I don't think you'll have an issue. Also, the rifles, it would be nice if they were all more straightened, maybe using a harder plastic. I think that would certainly help them in the future. Having weapons that looked more intimidating than what this one ends up looking like. And then as for Jyn, she's pretty good. The biggest problem with her is the lack of kind of fine-tuned face painting detail that Hasbro is kind of capable of in terms of their large-scale released figures. So they're not really able to give that TLC that we're seeing from Mafex or that we're seeing from the more imported companies that are working with larger price points and catering almost exclusively towards higher end collectors. See, this kind of has to scratch both itches as far as adult collectors and children. So I kind of get why they have to make some of the choices that they make in terms of costs, because the costs have to be relatively low in order for people to really buy them for their kids for Christmas. And with taking all of that into account, I think that they're both fine. There's nothing like, wow, there's nothing like this really going to knock you on your feet here. Knock me on my feet. They had an era where they were knocking me off my feet almost every release, and then it got to a time where they just sort of got complacent. I don't know if complacent is the right word, but it's like they found their zone and they or their lane and they rode it, and that's fine. But what I'd like to see is some improvements. I don't think we're seeing any improvements here. It's just more kind of status quo. But the good news is status quo at this price point is good enough. So I do recommend them. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.